Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to unclog a Bambu Lab X1 nozzle without unplugging anything or turning off the machine. So the first thing we're going to do is home the machine, unload the filament, and lower the bed to about here. You're going to want room to reach underneath there in case you drop a screw. And then I have a little magnetic tool tray that I use for my screws, my needle, and catching any screws that I drop. It's pretty handy. So once you're set up like that, you'll be good to go. You can either come in through the top if you don't have the top on, or you can do it up through the front. I'm going to be doing it through the front while filming through the top, but you can do either. So here we go. Okay, once you have everything going, you'll want a 1.5 millimeter hex to loosen the filament cutter arm. So you take a little bit of pressure off that, screw that out a little bit, drop that back. You may want to take the cutter out and set that aside, but I'm pretty used to where it's at so I don't cut myself. Next, you'll want to take a 2 millimeter hex and take out the screws for the hot end. Now, if this has been running and the hot end is still above 50 C, this little fan will still be running. So you'll want to be careful when you move that. So we just take our screws out, set those aside. If your fan is running, you want to be careful because you'll rub it on the LiDAR. You don't want to do that while it's running, but you can push down on here. This is typically cool enough, and then once you grab this on both sides, you can pull this forward and up. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some 3 millimeter by 40 screws and go in there, right back through the original holes, but we've just moved the extruder from inside, or the hot end I mean, from the inside to the outside, so we can get at that filament hole. And I screw those in just a little bit, like 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter. You don't want to go too far because your extruder gear will get hit by those screws. So once we're here, we're going to take our temperature up to 225 for PLA, maybe higher if you're doing something else. And this is going to heat up that hot end. Now, if you've got an actual clog, which I'm not sure if I do or not, you may have to take the needle and push that out to free up that clog so you can get a little bit more filament down in there. So that's what I'm going to do now once this comes up to temp. So I'm going to take my nozzle cleaning needle and I'm going to shove it up in there just so I can grab my filament out of that nozzle. Now that's clear, we can feed in. Once we're up to temp, we can feed in. I use a different color filament. I was printing black. I'm going to shove in red here. And I'm just going to feed that in. And you pretty much want to feed it till it stops. Once it stops, that clog is down at the bottom of your nozzle, hopefully. I don't think mine was actually clogged here. But you're going to feed that in till it stops, till you stop getting filament coming out. That way you've got as much melted down in there as possible. Now we're going to cut the temp down to 80 for PLA. If you're doing some other higher temperature filament, you're going to want to get that a little bit higher probably. And right now we're waiting for this nozzle to cool down, and so we can do a cold pull. I kind of like to call this a warm pull because it's not completely cold when you do the pull. Things to consider: you may want to untuck these wires from this little clip here. Mine kind of pop in and out as needed. You also don't want to pinch those wires in there, but once we've got this melted filament down in there, when we go to pull it out, the filament's actually going to stretch, which is good because it pulls that away from the walls of that hot end, and then we'll be left with just a little nub at the end that will hopefully contain our clog, whether that be metal or burnt filament or whatever other kind of junk you got in there. I haven't experimented with doing it at temps any higher than 80°C, but it's possible that you may want to do it at a higher temp. If you go too high, the filament will just melt and separate. And I'll pause here until this gets up to temp. Okay, now that this is down to 80°C, before I said up to temp, I meant down to temp. 80°C, what we're going to do is we're going to hold our hot end, because we don't want to put too much pressure on these screws. And then we're just going to pull this filament, and it'll get shorter. And if everything goes good, it'll stretch, pull away from the walls, but you'll be left with this little nub at the end of the filament, which will be a perfect shape of the nozzle as it tapers and gets down to the 0.4 or whatever you got installed. And you'll be able to see if you have any gunk there. If that pulls out there, you're usually good. A lot of times I'll take an X-Acto knife and I'll cut that off to find my clog. But if it goes well and comes out nice and clean, you'll see the shape of that inside of that nozzle, and you'll know that everything is clear. So at this point, we'll put everything back together. We'll take our M3 40 screws out. And right now this fan is still running, so you want to keep it this way, if anything, not that way. But so I just go down and up, and then we'll put the screws back in. So when you're taking this apart again, you just take the screws out, come straight down, out, up, and then put your screws through. So once our screws are in, all we do is run our extruder or our hot end screws back in. And take our filament cutter. Be careful putting this back in the hole, because you can ding up the edge of that blade. Push that in almost all the way. Run our screw back in just till it stops. Doesn't have to be tight, it's just a placeholder. And then we put our cover back on. If you want, you can tuck your wires back in if they're not exactly where you want them. Usually they fall right back into place. I use tweezers to do that. And then put the cover back on, and you're good to go. So in the next video I do, hopefully, I'll show you how to unblock an extruder blockage. Thanks for watching.